Heyo, I do. It has been a perfectly reasonable time since I last did one of these, and nobody can tell me otherwise. I would give an excuse as to why this is taking me so long, but I don't have one. God, that one person who said I was too harsh towards Navia. You have not seen anything yet. So we open up with Adito and Izu with Sakuya about to wake up. She's being restored, that's the first thing we see. Her data can be salvaged because she wasn't directly hacked by a Zetsumerizer, as Izu explains, so her backup remains intact. So I don't have to entirely recreate her and give this whole new humour gear her body and act like that's totally not weird or uncomfortable at all. This is the same Sakuya we've just spent the last episode with. She wakes up and Adito and Izu continue talking over her. Obviously learning more about what's happening to Humour Gear right now, especially since they seem to be acting as though they've just been hacked, but without having Izu and Adito are talking about her, about the technicalities of what happened, like actively talking over her. Like they're both on either side of her saying, "It looks like Ichirin Sakuyo's programming was rewritten." What? Izu, check out all the Humour Gear for similar irregularities, while Sakuyo has just woken up and sat up right in between them. And they know this! They're just not saying anything to her. Obviously this is urgent, but it can wait for the sake of a few seconds to check that she's okay first. By the way, my Japanese was extremely limited when I first watched this, but I've been having actual lessons with an actual teacher now, so I'm starting to pick up more on tone and politeness, or lack thereof, and okay, I'm not super confident, so take these bits with a grain of salt, but that was definitely a direct command. It wasn't asking nicely. Would it kill you to say "shirobete kudasai"? I know that's not the point, he's just being really direct, which one, rude, and two, is an uncomfortable thing to wake up to, isn't it? I mean, just picture the scene, and I know I'm about to get way too judgmental here, but it's been 84 years, so let me have this. It's not a very nicely decorated room. You know, it's bright and white and clinical, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a lab looking like this, but to Sakuyo, this is more of a hospital room, right? I mean, just try and view things from a Humour Gear's perspective when they're in this building. The hidden reception area just has a severed head in a display case, and Sakuyo is waking up in a really clinical room. And I'm not saying human hospital rooms are any nicer, but at least we don't have human bodies strung up along the walls. Skinned human bodies. I know, I'm sorry, I'm not genuinely serious, but isn't that such a disturbing thought? Just imagine you waking up in hotel room. Imagine waking up in a hotel room after like a surgery or something. That is horrifying. Imagine you wake up in a hospital room, and right next to you, a few skinned bodies just there. On a genuine note, though, I do just once again feel like Adito's so-called consideration and care for Humour Gear just isn't being given any opportunity to shine through. Just little bits of set dressing, I guess, would have gone a long way to showing his mysterious invisible compassion. Taking a moment or two to ask how she is first, not just standing there and talking over her in a serious and direct manner. Can we not try to make sure she's comfortable first? That touch right at the start of the series of wrapping up Mamoru's injury, that was a nice, easy moment to show that he cares, but ever since then, I just don't buy it. Maybe he could have previously made the effort to consider Humour Gear's comfort. We don't need a scene about it, but just adding a bedsheet or a pillow or something would have been such an easy way to show he cares. I mean, yeah, there's a kind of pillow that looks attached to the thing, but those aren't comfortable. And sure, you can make the argument that maybe it isn't necessary, but neither was tending to Mamoru's injury. I mean, you look at Daybreak, and sure it's leaking, and all the comfort things are old and salvaged and sewn together and full of holes, but an effort has been made to be comfortable, to be like a nice place that is being lived in. And then you have this, the room Sakuyo has had to wake up in, and it's so cold and uncaring in comparison. Which honestly brings me nicely to this new feature that I'm implementing in these videos. I have a bingo card. Because if you have watched any of my Genshin oh my god, if you have watched any of my Genshin videos recently, you'll know how much I love a good bingo card. So let's go through them. Obviously, free space is a scorpion, because why wouldn't it be? So the middle row we have Izuyo gaze adoringly at Adato, which I think is self-explanatory. Slavery is okay if I say it is. Beautiful fight choreography, and she's a rider who's female, not a female rider. That's mainly about Yua, because I do praise the way that she was written quite a bit. She's missing a lot of character and a lot of... Nobody really has an arc in this series, but throughout Toku shows we have had a lot of, like, oh, this is the such and such personality one, and this is the such and such personality one, and this is the girl one, and Yua was never like that, so that's what that means. Takaiwa Seiji is Takaiwa Seiji, and I know that sounds too close to beautiful fight choreography, but it's not, because Takaiwa Seiji, he can just walk, or he can just, like, stand in a certain way and make you feel things. Like, he doesn't have to be fighting to just, like, be in a suit and, like, just make your heart explode. It's my job to teach you not to be mean to me. It's for whenever the human is absolutely god-awful to the humour gear, and it's down to the humour gear to teach them to please not be mean. It's the victim's job to make sure the perpetrator learns not to victimise people. Believe in Adato Shacho, again, I feel is a bit self-explanatory. Bodily autonomy, who is she? Basically, anytime anybody's bodily autonomy is just completely, like, what even is that? Think the whole Fua and Naki situation that we're getting to soon. Horobi is a dad, again, self-explanatory. Fua is a dad, again, self-explanatory. He was hacked by the Ark, for God's sake. Whenever I get incredibly infuriated by, it's usually Adato, trying to talk a humour gear down from being hacked when, like, that's not how it works. It doesn't have to, it's usually Horobi. It doesn't have to be Horobi for the box to be ticked off. This is Kamen Rider. This is very sort of open to interpretation, I suppose, but it's basically whenever anything extremely weird or extremely disturbing happens, this is Kamen Rider. Humour gear are the machines of our dreams. This is for when a speech is made, usually like that quote or something similar is made. Like, humour gear exist for us, but in a way that is supposed to sound very motivational and yay, equality, but it never is. Neojin is horrible to dad. Again, self-explanatory. Rider kick, basic Kamen Rider stuff. 6 seconds of screen time. This is for when Horobi gets those precious few moments, like at the end of an episode or the beginning of an episode, and then we never see him again. Sparkle emoji, Fua heart. This is just when Fua just does something that is inherently Fua. The arc is my favourite villain. Again, self-explanatory. Fua has the biggest character arc. Fua Punch. Guy is my favourite villain. But he had a robot dog. This is not only applicable to Guy. This is basically whenever anyone is horrible, think the estate agent in the upcoming episode, but we're supposed to feel bad for them because they have an uwu tragic story. And missing compassion, which is what needs to be ticked off now, is whenever, like, we're supposed to feel that Adato, supposed to believe throughout the series that Adato is super compassionate to humour gear, but he very rarely is. So whenever that's sort of glaring, then that is ticked off. Believe in humour gear. Believe in humour gear is different than humour gear or the machines of our dreams, and when I have an example, you will understand it better. It makes sense to me. Okay, anyway, where was I? Izuyo tells Adato that Sakuyo's programming was rewritten for reasons unknown, and Adato tells her, kind of rudely, to check all the humour gear for the same thing. Izuyo says, of course. Adato says, thanks. Sakuyo says, Adato Shacho, and Adato looks at this clearly upset person who's just been hacked, killed and restored, and says, well, we lost the Ikebana competition. Like, I'm sorry, why is that the first thing on your mind? Oh, the humour gear who works with flowers and has just done a flower competition for the company before being harassed, bullied, pushed, hacked and killed, and then revived. Must be about to ask me about the flower competition, because that's the most important thing that's happened today. Why are you assuming that that's what she was going to say? After everything she's been through, why are you so confident that that's what she wants to talk about? Is this bad enough to have people talking over you in what is essentially a medical setting? Because that is what this is to Sakuyo, right? That's demeaning enough. And it's cold. It feels cold not to say anything to her. The fact that Jin is so excited to see Ansaz-chan again. And they have that really sweet interaction where he's jumping up and down and high-fiving Ansaz-chan, and he's like, Jin, that hurts. But Adato and Isa just completely blank Sakio, who was hacked and killed and restored, and now waking up and slowly sitting up, and the first thing you say to her is, well, we lost the competition. Oh, I need to breathe. This is not good for me after COVID. Not, how are you feeling? Are you okay? I'm sorry that guy pushed you. Don't worry about the competition. You tried your best. No, just, well, looks like we lost. Ikebana shobu, makechata ne. Wow, I can feel the compassion just radiating from him right now. This is a guy who cares about humour gear. I feel like just a few lines before this could have shown this theoretical compassion. Sakuyo, mega sametan da ne? Daijoubu? Shinpai shitai yo? Sakuyo, you're awake. Are you okay? You worried us. Adato shacho. Ikebana shobu. Make her be the one to bring it up. And then Adato could say something like, Zanen dakedo, makechatan da. Like, just have Adato care about her well-being and have Sakuyo bring the competition up first. That would have changed the tone of this scene so much. We are 1 minute and 27 seconds in. Anyway, Sakuyo then drops a bombshell that Tachibana actually cheated, that he misled her and convinced her to sabotage her own display. Which, okay, she doesn't say that yet. We just know that now. She just says that he lied to her, and then 01, 01, 01, 01, and then Guy has some tea, so we'll get back to Jam in a sec. How am I doing? So Guy is disappointed that Yua hasn't been able to find much about the stolen Pro Guy's key, even after putting in significant effort for such a beautiful victory, because he is such a perfectionist. The fact that he won the first challenge should be celebration worthy. He should be cracking open a bottle of... what do rich people drink? Prosecco? Not wine that would stain his pristine white clothes. What am I waffling on about? Point is that he can't even celebrate his victory because this other thing isn't working out. He can only focus on the negatives, can't he? He can't appreciate what he has. He can only fixate on what he don't have. Which, as a former so-called gifted child, I can honestly totally relate. Perfectionism is something that I really needed to work on because it isn't healthy. But when you grow up being expected to do everything perfectly on your first try and have people disappointed in you when you have an off day, that does things to a child, you know? But, I mean, as someone who didn't have strict parents in any way, shape or form, I mean, you've met my mum and dad. Traumatising in other ways, sure, but not like that. But I did have other should-be role models in my life constantly pressuring me to be perfect all the time. I can, to a certain degree, understand Guy's mentality in that regard. Like, I can understand the perfectionism and focusing on what isn't happening right over what is. And the specific word he said was sekkaku. Sekkaku. Which I think kind of means like a lot of effort was put in. Like, you went to great lengths to do something, so it must be frustrating when you put an awful lot of effort into something that didn't yield the exact results you wanted. But I didn't commit genocide and torture people and become a sexual harasser in the workplace, so... Adato calls Guy after learning that Tachibana cheated, and they all meet up with proof of what happened from Sakuyo's personal recording thing. And it turns out Tachibana approached Sakuyo complimenting her work and offering advice, which was to include this one branch that, in his own words later on, disrupted the harmony of the arrangement. Which he doesn't deny. I mean, how can you when you've just been shown video evidence? And needless to say, Guy is very pissed off. Tachibana is representing Zaya, and now he's been proven to have cheated. That reflects badly on Zaya and Zaya's spec. He's showing that he has absolutely no faith that the Zaya specs will help him beat a humour gear. I mean, Guy is allowed to cheat when he has absolutely no faith in himself and his own company, but other people, that is where the line is drawn. And Tachibana admits this. He says he didn't say that. He says he underestimated humour gear. He saw Sakuyo's arrangement and thought, shit, that's really good, actually. Not only did he clearly not think the Zaya specs would help him, but he didn't believe in his own ability to do better than Sakuyo. Which is why I don't believe Sakuyo being a humour gear actually has anything to do with it. I know he says so. He says he underestimated humor gear and that a human and robot competing is a joke. But I feel like if Sakuyo had been a human florist working in a garden centre, brought to compete against him and was doing better than him, he'd have acted the exact same way. In fact, I think if somebody who was known for being good at Ikebana was competing against him and Tachibana was losing, he would have reacted the same way. It really doesn't matter who it is that he's losing to. I don't buy that he's being a dickhead because she's a humor gear. I think he's being a dickhead because he feels like his image is being threatened. He's known in the Ikebana world. This is what he does. And if this master of Ikebana is seen to lose to someone who's never done it before, that's gonna reflect badly on him no matter what. I mean, he still needs to get his anger issues dealt with. He still shouldn't be going around pushing people over and lying to win. I'm definitely not justifying any of that, but I don't think he's actively anti-humor gear. He'd be saying the same things with different words if she wasn't. I mean, the series has so many one-off characters who are just dickheads to humor gear because why not? Because they don't see them as real people. But I don't think this guy is that. I mean, later on, we see him having what looks to just be a total breakdown over his fear of losing, so I fully believe his issues here have nothing to do with Sakuyo being a humor gear, and everything to do with just not being able to lose, and just losing faith in himself, and I have more to say about that, but I'll do that later. Anyway, this was the episode that told us Guy is 45, but he's eternally 24. I was waiting for that to be explained further, and it never was. Especially the reaction he has. There's nothing more sinful than youth, superficial wisdom, lacking dignity, the glossy texture of youthful skin, everything about it is unpleasant. He speaks about being youthful with such disdain, which, I mean, generational clashes is nothing new. You're always going to have people looking down on the younger generation. But he is so just unhappy about it. He is, in his own words, forever youthful, but he severely hates youthfulness. Like, why was this never actually a plot point? Because watching this for the first time, this was so interesting to me because, well, such a focus had been put on it that it felt like it was sitting the audience down and telling us this is going to be important later. It was never important. Unless I'm forgetting something obvious, it was never important. The way he goes on about youthfulness, despite he himself being eternally youthful, it just made me think that something was done to him, and that's why he's eternally 24? Like, was something done to him when he was actually 24 that just halted his aging for whatever reason, and he hates that that happened, and that's at least partially why he's so bitter? Was there some kind of secret hidden project that Guy was subjected to that resulted in him no longer aging, and that's why he has such complicated feelings towards hidden intelligence and Kurinosuke? Maybe he did respect Kurinosuke, but he was young and naive back then, and it resulted in something happening. Maybe he died and humor gear technology was used to revive him, but it resulted in him no longer being able to age, and he's essentially a cyborg, and he hates it, and that's why he's got such a bee in his bonnet about humor gear, because they reflect a part of himself that he really don't like. There are so many ways you can theorise, but I don't think this specific thing was ever actually relevant. It was never really a plot point, and sure, not everything needs to be explained, especially in a sci-fi. Like, it's okay for things to just not make sense. But I feel like this really should have been a thing. We didn't even need a whole entire episode dedicated to explaining it. It easily could have been like just a line or two. It just feels like this is one of so many things that had so much potential to be interesting, but then just never was. It kind of feels like, instead of having an interesting thread or like an actual idea, they just really wanted this character to both have been involved with Kurinosuke and be played by Sakuragi Nachi, and so they just had to say, oh, he just looks young. Which, I mean, I understand. If you could have a character played by Sakuragi Nachi, wouldn't you? He played 45 so well, and if you had the option to have him in your projects, like, you would, wouldn't you? It don't matter if it makes sense or not. You'd want him to act in your thing, right? But then if you were never going to explain it, why have Guy make such a fuss of youthfulness. If he hadn't have been like, oh, ew, young people, then maybe we could have just accepted that, oh, this is a guy who's vain and rich and both wants to and has the resources to take care of himself to the point of being able to look so young. It's just something he's doing to himself. Makes sense. Move on. But him making such a big deal about it and then never going further with that is so weird. Guy is one of my favourite villains, as the bingo card says. So, like, I want to know more about him, and not that torture and murder and sexual harassment is okay because he had a strict dad and a robot dog. Or he had a robot dog and then didn't. I need to move on, but it's wasted potential, right? What about to enter into a scene that, to me, really highlights the difference between a Humage who has gained singularity and a Humage who hasn't. I don't know at what point Izu was supposed to have gained singularity herself, but it happens by the episode where Adato smuggles data keys out, so we're on the lookout for it together. But there's nothing about this conversation that indicates she has. Because they just finished replicating an assault grip, and Izu says that Zea's ability to replicate anything it sees is like Sakuyo's ability to replicate Ikebana displays, to which Sakuyo says that replicating it isn't enough. The beauty of Ikebana is that it changes. Sakuyo doesn't want to just replicate things. She wants to create something new. She absolutely can create something new. She talks about how Tachibana's arrangement was actually beautiful, but it only became ugly because he cheated. Because flower arranging is a display of the creator's heart, and negative actions cause the display to not look as nice. Honestly, that is very easy to see in a lot of artistic things. I mean, take, for example, She Who Will Not Be Named. It's so easy to see racism and anti-Semitism and transphobia in the Harry Potter books now that her true colours have been revealed. And to a much lesser extent, once you realise Moffat is quite sexist, whether he wants to admit it or not, it makes it so much easier to see the blatant sexism in Doctor Who episodes he's written. I mean, as if it needs to be any easier to point out, but it helps. And because I, admittedly, do not like him, it made it so hard to enjoy Boom, because even though I really don't think there were that many transgressions in that episode, I mean, there were some, but not that many. But regardless, the fact that he wrote it was in the back of my mind, and it did hinder my ability to enjoy it. Obviously, Tachibana's actions were nowhere near on the same level as those two, and even those two, their actions are nowhere near on the same level, obviously. Saying somebody is a lot worse than Stephen Moffat. But what I'm saying is, it absolutely does happen. And it turns out Sakuyo learned this from Tachibana's teachings, which will be even more relevant later. But to go back to my first point in this bit, Sakuyo being able to understand abstract concepts while Izu's comprehension is very basic, to me is a stark contrast, and no offence, but there's just no chance she's gained singularity yet. Tachibana, I believe, is the first human to be transformed with a Raiderizer. He's on his own and he is just freaking out. He's repeating, this time I will win, I will win. And this is when it's so very clear that there's more to this than the competition. And of course we don't really know all that much about his past, but I feel at least that this is a more accurate result of what could happen if someone was raised like Guy. I wouldn't be surprised if Tachibana, say, grew up in a strict environment and had a lot of expectations on him, so now these expectations are starting to waver and not be met, it's severely impacting him. I don't know if that is the case, I'm not going to pretend there's hard evidence that that was the case, it's just a feeling I get, but he's remembering two specific things that were said to him. Sakuyo telling him his work is ugly and repulsive, and Guy telling him his flower arranging career would be over. These two comments are the ones sticking with him the most. His career is in jeopardy, and he's been insulted because Ikebana is supposed to be a reflection of your heart, and as this episode established, and he cheated, so Sakuyo is saying his heart is ugly and repulsive, which is totally justified on her end, but it's going to impact him. And he's regretting entering the competition, and I understand. It's one thing to arrange flowers as a career, but it's another to have your talent on display against others and risk being told that actually, this other person is better than you. You have to be in the right frame of mind to enter a competition, and he clearly was not. He never should have been approached, he never should have felt like he had to enter, but of course if he was going to be approached, like what choice did he have? What was he going to say no? Of course he had to, because saying no would also reflect badly on him. He's going through a lot, clearly. I just feel this isn't throwing a tantrum because you're losing. There's so much more to it than that. And he's got so much more going on right now than a competition. Then someone mysterious shows up and tells him that his mind is broken, but the Raid Riser will protect it. And I wonder who this is. Anyway, so then, you know, shit happens. He attends the rematch, and Raid Riser stuff happens, and then fight and everything, and then he's knocked out of it, and Aruto says things that of course he says, and we don't need to address it every single time. I think that this episode does slightly show how Aruto does not view humans and human equally, because at least, and bear in mind, it's been a while since I've watched these, and I didn't really watch the entire quarter of the series up until this point. I just rewatched this episode. After Mamoru, did he really try that hard to not get Humagear killed? I mean, he actively killed Humagear for no good reason. Jin, we're talking about baby Jin. You didn't have to say, short of killing a 5-year-old child is the last resort and you've exhausted all other options, fine. But he didn't need to say the things that he said. And when a Humagear is gone after and when this human is gone after, are you really reacting the same? I don't think he is. Of course, I mean, yeah, okay, Humagear can be recreated or whatever, but they effectively died and you're replacing them. Not Sakio and not really Humagear up until this point. I mean, from this point onwards, because things have changed. But before now, the Humagear died and you recreated them. You didn't really revive them, you just recreated them. The person they were before is dead. Arlecchino, are you listening? The nicer way to put it is that he did an Arlecchino. They're still dead. They're still dead. I think being able to just create another person with the same body and in the same job and everything, I think it just makes him feel better. Because it's the same thing. It's the same as death to a Humagear in the way that it was set up at first. Is there really a difference? There isn't. The only difference is that you can't then recreate a human so that you can feel better, so you can look at the human being alive and think, yes, they're not dead. I did my job. I can feel good about myself. I don't know. But anyway, so things happen and Tachibana is saved, and I'm not going to spend too much time going on about how it shouldn't be the Humagear's job to convince humans to be nice to them, because trust me, I will address that in another episode. But if you put that aspect aside for one moment and just get rid of Aruto for a sec, this whole interaction is really sweet, actually. Sakio explains that she learned flower arranging from basically analysing data from his school, and she goes on to tell him what she learned, that Ikebana is a reflection of the person's heart and that seeing his arrangement helped her understand. And Tachibana says he feels like a teacher being taught by his student, and I'm sorry, but that's so cute! Genuinely, I would love nothing more than for Tachibana to actually go on to take Sakio on as an apprentice, or however this works, because she clearly has a passion for it, and he was clearly touched by her words, and it would be great for her to learn more, and I think it would be great for him to teach. Seeing throughout the episode how he seemed to be losing faith in himself and his flower arranging abilities, I do think it would be good for him to have an apprentice to teach directly. And hopefully that would help him grasp that he is good at what he does, and he's worrying for nothing. He is very talented at this, and he doesn't need to cheat to do well because he's good at it. And it would be so nice to have a Humagear character learn something because she wants to, and she is interested, and not because she has to because the human says so. They do seem to have mutual respect for each other by the end of the episode, which I know is usually how these episodes go, but this time it isn't. The Humagear respects the human because they have to, and the human now appreciates what the Humagear can do for them. But it's both Tachibana and Sakio respecting each other's creativity and passion and artistic expression. Tachibana even says that Sakio's display during the rematch is a beautiful reflection of her own heart. This is genuinely a human-Humagear pairing I could actually see respecting each other equally. Even if there would be a power imbalance as a student and teacher, I think she would respect him as a teacher and he'd respect her as a student, and that is the kind of dynamic I'm craving in this series. Just one thing I wasn't fond of in this scene, and that was Aruto pushing gently. He wasn't shoving, he just sort of stood behind Aruto.
Sakuyo, I believe I was trying to say there.
Put his hands on her shoulders and guided her forwards, basically encouraging her to say all that stuff in the first place, which would be fine and lovely if Adato was actually written as this compassionate character we keep being told about, because now I see what should be a nice friendly gesture as controlling, but there's absolutely no reason to think that. I am just being harsh towards Navia. But this is the way I have been led to view Adato now throughout the series, so that is how gestures like these feel. If it was this compassionate character who genuinely views humans and Humage equally, and is really sweet actually, then that would have been such a comforting gesture. And Fumiya, Adato is so expressive and over the top in a way you'd expect from a Toka character. He's very Kando, Jan, Ikari guy, all of the Imagine. And he's very good at that. He is phenomenal at that, but he's also, because that kind of thing has potential to be annoying, but he does it in a way that even somebody who doesn't like the character, I never found his over-the-topness annoying. Sometimes I did because of the context, but never the way that he acted it. He was very good at it. But he's also really good at the more toned down moments, and I don't talk about Fumiya's acting enough because Adato bugs me too much that I forget, and that's completely unfair because Fumiya is incredible. And if I put aside my preconceived feelings towards Adato and purely view it as this one scene, then Fumiya plays it really well. It's gentle, and it's friendly, and it's encouraging, and it's just him being in his friend's corner being supportive. But because Adato is just written as someone who says he views humans and Humage equally, but all we actually ever see is him just wanting Humage to do as they're supposed to and help humans, and wanting humans to accept Humage as their help, I don't care what anyone might say, I'm yet to find this compassion of his in the bigger picture. And so then it just taints what could be a nice moment. And it's frustrating because I want this to be a nice moment. He's doing it really well, I want to not view it badly. But I was saying that Humage can teach humans too because Sakuya did is so frustrating. I keep saying Sakuya now, don't I? It's Sakuyo. You can't watch one Humage do a thing and say, all Humage can do this thing. Like, would you be saying this if you actually viewed Humage as equals? As people? This said while watching Sakuyo and Tachibana complement each other's work after Tachibana is declared the winner of the rematch. Unless you're also going to say, wow, humans can learn things, then I'm not seeing the equality here. You can't watch one Humage do one thing and say, wow, isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing that Humage can do this specific thing? All of them, they all can. Doesn't that make them all so wonderful? Especially when Sakuyo being a Humage really has bugger all to do with it. I mean, a human and a Humage can have a conflict and then make up, without it actually being anything to do with being human and Humage. And I know what Tachibana said about humans and robots competing, but when we saw him alone, it was never about losing to an AI. It was about losing, in general, just losing. It really didn't matter to who. Just if your takeaway from this entire saga is, wow, Humage in general are so wonderful because Sakuyo, then you're not viewing them equally, are you? Anyway, I need to calm myself down because it's time for the moment you have all been waiting for, introducing this week's installment of the Horobi and Fua Show! Yay! Horobi says, a human went berserk. That must mean a Raiderizer was used. Fua says, Raiderizer? What do you know? You really have a comrade out there, don't you? And Horobi says, they might be closer than you think. They may even be right behind you. And there's a figure behind Fua that disappears when he turns around, and I had to start watching Zero One at night with the lights off. And that's this week's 6 seconds of screen time. Seriously, so much happened here. It would overload all of us if I tried to delve into it. Oh, this is such a good time to be a friend of Merciful Jinrai. No, I tell a lie. There's one thing to say, and that is that the word Naki was used when saying they may be closer than you think. They may even be right behind you. So, there. Right. I'm off. It's great to be doing these again. The next episode, I believe, is the one with the estate agent who pushes Sumida Smile into a lake because he grew up poor. Hopefully it won't be, 3 years until the next one? We'll see. And Sibby.